All right, well, if you're anything like me, your cell phone is probably permanently attached to your body. Smartphones are the new personal assistant. You can keep track of your busy schedule, surf the web, check email, record important events, and oh yeah, make phone calls too. Now, for most Americans, cell phones are essentially part of their body. You can choose your cell phone carrier, and you can also choose your cell phone itself. But sometimes the cell phone is not supported by the company that you have your service with. And in that case, some people have actually turned to jailbreaking their phones. Now, jailbreaking is the process of hacking into an operating system of a phone and unlocking it so that the phone can be used by any carriers. So a Verizon iPhone could be used by a T-Mobile customer, even though T-Mobile doesn't carry it. However, a new version of the Digital Millennium Copyright Act makes that illegal. So even though you own your cell phone, you cannot, in fact, do whatever it is you want with it. And violators could face 5 years in prison and up to $500,000 in fees if they are caught. For more, Derek Khanna joins me now. He's a visiting fellow at the Yale Law Information Society Project. Derek, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me on.
Break this down for me. How is this illegal?
Sure. Just one thing I wanted to quibble with you on. The technique that's illegal is called unlocking.
Unlocking versus jailbreaking.
Yes, and it's not as complicated as some people may think. So basically, you take your phone, you plug it into a computer, and you run a computer program. It changes some of the settings, and now you can use your phone on a different carrier. So it's a pretty easy process. It's very commonly used, and now it's illegal.
Okay, and who is the one that holds you accountable?
Presumably, the Justice Department can hold you liable for a $500,000 fine or 5 years in prison. And additionally, you're civilly liable on top of that. But my main articles were on the thrust of the idea of putting an individual in prison for 5 years for unlocking their phone being kind of crazy.
Sure. Now, currently under the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, those found guilty of unlocking their phones could be potentially facing these 5 years in jail, as we talked about. But really, what is the motivation for making this practice illegal?
It really is the result of shoddy lawmaking, a law from 1998, the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, that regulates all copyright in the United States, but was created before modern media. It was created before the Kindle and the iPod and the ebook. And as a result, it actually makes a large amount of modern technologies illegal. And it's up to the Librarian of Congress to provide exceptions to keep these technologies lawful. And the Librarian of Congress decided that this exception was no longer necessary, on the advice of AT&T and Verizon, who, of course, were arguing that it was not necessary.
Okay, so was this another example of an antiquated law kind of ruling our digital lives? And I mean, obviously this law is only 10 or so years old, but is it an example of an antiquated law?
I think it's an example of antiquated law. I mean, 1998 was before modern media, 3 years before the iPod, 5 years before the Kindle. And we should have laws that reflect modern technology, and that's not what this law is. I mean, it's even a contestable question about whether or not your cell phone is under this act or not. So it's a really asinine system where not only is it probably illegal, but we don't actually know if it's illegal, which is just not a way to conduct a criminal justice system where you have a law that may or may not apply to you.
Okay, so let's talk about, you had mentioned T-Mobile as one of the carriers. AT&T and Verizon are the ones that are fighting against this. T-Mobile's the one that are fighting for this legislation. T-Mobile's the one that's fighting against it, from what I understand. They actually put up an ad saying, bring in your unlocked cell phones, encouraging people to unlock cell phones. So can you kind of talk about this dichotomy between the carriers?
Well, this is a clear example of crony capitalism, where the big market participants wanted the law to be built in such a way to ensure that they didn't have new competition. And so T-Mobile was asking for their customers to come and bring their unlocked iPhones and come over to T-Mobile. Now, T-Mobile didn't actually file against this decision. They were kind of quiet on it. But they were advertising for their customers to unlock their phones until the technique became illegal, and then they shut that campaign down. So it's a clear example of where one market participant actually likes this existing technique. And then the small wireless providers, they actually fought it to the Librarian of Congress. They filed against this decision, and they argued that this would destroy small businesses, and they were correct.
And we know that T-Mobile obviously doesn't offer some of the services such as the iPhone, so perhaps this is their way to kind of skirt around not having to pay the iPhone for their services, but also having it. But let's talk about the petition that you and others started on We the People. So what are you exactly trying to accomplish, and how are you going to get it done, more importantly?
Oh, we already got it done. So what had happened is we created this petition on the We the People website. which until last month were only required 25,000 signatures, and they upped it to 100,000 signatures. Well, we beat that. We beat it with time to spare. We're at 110,000 signatures, and on Saturday it was turned over to the White House. So now the ball's in his court. And it's going to be interesting to see where the White House comes down on this, as far as, is this an appropriate decision by the Librarian of Congress, or are they going to recommend for Congress to fix this?
And what kind of response are you hoping to get back from the White House, if any? Well, you do have to get one back, so what are you hoping to get back?
Well, I mean, in the past there was a petition on creating the Death Star.
Yep.
And the White House took that seriously, and they provided quite a lengthy explanation about how President Obama is against the destruction of planets. So
hopefully you won't be getting that response back.
We don't want that, but we expect a real response here. This is a serious issue. 100,000 Americans are on record and more every day. This is an issue that affects tens of thousands of our service members. When our service members are deployed over to Afghanistan or even to other countries, they have to unlock their phones. There isn't AT&T in Afghanistan. So, to you or I, the idea of creating, of unlocking our phone may just seem kind of a stupid law. But to our service members, the idea of committing a felony is actually a pretty serious thought process.
Okay, and finally, we have just about a minute left, but you had mentioned that you have to go to the Library of Congress. Why the Library of Congress, of all places?
That's how they constructed the law in 1998. The Librarian of Congress has the final word.
All right, Derek Khanna, very interesting conversation, something we are going to be following up on in coming days, and hopefully we'll have you back on the program. Derek Khanna, thank you so much for joining us.